Good morning, everyone. Have you ever felt like you're capable of more but somehow stuck in your own way? Like you're trying to climb a mountain, but the heaviest weight is the one you're carrying in your mind? Let me tell you something, you are not alone. The truth is, our greatest barriers aren't out there. They're in here. Gesture to head dot. Let me start with a question. What story did you tell yourself about today before you walked into this room? Maybe it was, I don't really belong here, or I'll never be able to do what they've done. Or perhaps it was, I'm not the kind of person who achieves big things. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know this, you're not alone. All of us carry stories in our minds, stories about who we are, what we're capable of, and how the world works. And here's the catch, those stories shape our reality. The stories we tell ourselves aren't just words, they're filters, they shape how we see the world, how we act, and even how others perceive us. When you wake up every day thinking, I'm not enough, that belief seeps into everything. It influences the way you show up in a meeting, the risks you're willing to take, and the goals you allow yourself to dream of. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I worked with someone who wanted to start her own business. She had the skills, the network, and a solid plan. But every time she got close to launching, she froze. When we talked about it, she said, I've always been the kind of person who plays it safe. Starting a business just isn't me. Did you catch it? That phrase, just isn't me, that wasn't a fact. That was a story she'd been telling herself for years. And because she believed it, she acted like it was true. The moment she realized that story wasn't set in stone, things changed. She started asking herself, what if this story isn't the whole truth? What if I could rewrite it? And slowly she did. Today, her business is thriving not because she was fearless, but because she was willing to challenge the narrative she'd built in her mind. Now, here's the thing about our stories. Most of them aren't even ours to begin with. They come from somewhere else. Maybe it's the way you were raised, the things people said to you as a child, or the failures you've experienced in the past. They might have felt true at the time, but just because they felt true doesn't mean they are true. For example, if you failed at something once, your mind might spin a story, I'm just bad at this, and every time you face a similar challenge, that story comes rushing back, reinforcing itself until it feels like fact. But here's the truth, that story isn't your destiny. It's just a sentence in your mind. So how do we rewrite these stories? It starts with awareness. You can't change a story you don't realize you're telling. Pay attention to the words running through your mind, especially when you're facing a challenge. Ask yourself, is this a fact or is this just a story? The next step is to challenge the story. If your story is, I'm not good enough, ask yourself, according to whom? If it's, I'll never succeed, ask, what evidence do I have for that? What evidence do I have against it? Often you'll realize that the story falls apart under scrutiny. Finally, replace the old story with a new one. This doesn't mean lying to yourself or sugarcoating reality. It means choosing a story that serves you better. Instead of, I'll never succeed, try, I'm learning how to succeed. Instead of, I'm not good at this, try, I can get better at this with practice. I want to leave you with this thought, the stories we tell ourselves are powerful. They can either trap us or free us. The good news is, you are the author of your story. And no matter what's happened in the past, you can pick up the pen and write a new chapter today. Because when you master the stories in your mind, you open the door to mastering your life. Let's talk about a word that makes most of us a little uncomfortable: vulnerability. What comes to mind when you hear it? For many of us, vulnerability feels like weakness. It's that shaky feeling we get when we're stepping into the unknown or putting ourselves out there without guarantees. It feels risky, exposed, and maybe even a little terrifying. But here's the surprising truth: vulnerability isn't a weakness at all. It's a profound strength. It's the birthplace of courage, creativity, and connection. And if you're serious about achieving your goals, it's a skill you'll need to embrace. Let me share a story. A few years ago, a friend of mine decided to run her first marathon. She wasn't an athlete, and she was terrified of failing, terrified of being judged, terrified that she wouldn't make it past mile 5. But despite that fear, she signed up. The day of the marathon, she stood at the starting line, surrounded by experienced runners who looked the part: sleek gear, calm confidence, the kind of people who probably ran for fun. Meanwhile, she was standing there in her mismatched outfit, already sweating before the race even started. She told me later, "I almost didn't go. I almost stayed home because I felt so out of place." But then I realized showing up was the hardest part. And she was right. Being vulnerable enough to show up, to stand at that starting line despite her fear, that was courage. Because vulnerability isn't the absence of fear, it's showing up even when you're scared. Now, here's why vulnerability matters so much when it comes to achieving your goals. Goals, by their very nature, require growth. They demand that you step out of your comfort zone and into uncertainty. Whether it's starting a business, pursuing a passion, or building a relationship, you're going to face moments where you don't know if you can do it. That's vulnerability. And yet, how many of us avoid our goals because we're afraid of being vulnerable? We tell ourselves, what if I fail? What if people see me fail? So we play it safe. We stick to what's comfortable, what's predictable, and what doesn't make us feel exposed. But here's the thing, avoiding vulnerability doesn't protect you from failure, it guarantees it. Because when you refuse to take risks, you also refuse to grow. You can't achieve big things while staying small. Now, let's talk about what vulnerability actually looks like. Vulnerability is raising your hand and asking a question when you don't know the answer. Saying, "I need help," when you're struggling. Sharing your ideas, even when you're afraid they'll be dismissed. Trying something new, even if you don't know how it will turn out. Notice that none of these examples are about weakness. They're about showing up. Vulnerability is choosing to be seen as you are, even when it's uncomfortable. You might be wondering, why would I choose vulnerability when it feels so hard? Because vulnerability is where the magic happens. Think about the most meaningful moments in your life: falling in love, creating something you're proud of, taking a leap of faith. All of those moments required vulnerability. They required you to take a risk and open yourself up to the possibility of failure or rejection. And yes, sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes you fail. But here's the beauty of vulnerability. Even when you fall short, you grow. You learn. You get stronger. And every time you choose to be vulnerable, you build the resilience you need to keep going. Let me share one more story. There's a woman I know who dreamed of becoming an artist. She loved painting but never showed her work to anyone. She was afraid people would judge her or say she wasn't good enough. But one day she decided to take a chance. She submitted her art to a local gallery. And guess what? She didn't get in. The rejection stung, but something amazing happened. She realized she had survived it. The world hadn't ended. And because she survived, she felt braver. The next time she submitted her work, she got accepted. Today, she's a full-time artist. That's the power of vulnerability. It's not about avoiding failure, it's about building the courage to keep trying. So here's my challenge to you. What's one thing you've been avoiding because it makes you feel vulnerable? What's one risk you can take? One step you can show up for, even if you don't know what will happen? Because when you embrace vulnerability, you don't just open yourself up to failure, you open yourself up to growth, connection, and possibility. And that's where the real success begins. Let's talk about a myth that holds so many of us back, the belief that success is all about taking massive leaps. We picture someone achieving their goals and think they must have done something extraordinary, but the truth: real success isn't about giant, dramatic leaps. It's about small, consistent steps. It's about small wins. Small wins are those seemingly tiny moments of progress that, when repeated over time, lead to big, lasting change. Let me give you an example. Imagine you want to climb a mountain. You don't get there in one giant leap. You get there by putting one foot in front of the other over and over again until suddenly you look back and realize just how far you've come. But here's the thing, because small wins feel small, we often underestimate their power. We dismiss them. We think, what's the point of taking this little step? It won't make a difference, and so we don't start. I want to tell you about a man named James Clear who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. He talks about how small 1% improvements each day can add up to something extraordinary. If you can get 1% better at something every day, by the end of a year, you'll be 37 times better than when you started. But here's the flip side. If you get 1% worse every day, you're heading in the opposite direction. It's the power of compounding. Small wins don't just add up, they multiply. Let me share a real life story. A friend of mine wanted to get healthier. For years, she felt overwhelmed by the idea of overhauling her entire lifestyle. So instead of trying to change everything at once, she focused on one small win: drinking a glass of water every morning. That's it. One glass of water. At first, it felt almost insignificant. But after a few weeks, she added another small habit: walking for 5 minutes a day. Then she started packing healthier lunches. Over time, those small wins snowballed. A year later, she didn't just feel healthier, she barely recognized her old habits. The key here is momentum. Small wins create momentum because they build confidence. Every time you achieve a small goal, you prove to yourself that you're capable of change. And that belief, I can do, this is what fuels you to keep going. Here's another example. Thomas Edison, one of the greatest inventors in history, didn't create the light bulb in one stroke of genius. He conducted over 1,000 experiments, each one building on the last. Every failed attempt wasn't just a failure, it was a small win, a step closer to the solution. The same principle applies to your goals. Whether you're trying to launch a business, write a book, or change a habit, it's not about perfection. It's about showing up, doing the work, and celebrating the small wins along the way. But here's something we need to talk about. Why don't we celebrate small wins? It's because we're so focused on the end goal that we overlook the progress we're making. We think, I haven't achieved my dream yet, so what's there to celebrate? I want to challenge that mindset. Celebrating small wins isn't about lowering your standards. It's about recognizing the steps you're taking towards something bigger. It's about giving yourself credit for the effort, not just the outcome. I think about it like this: if you were cheering on a friend who is working toward a goal, would you only celebrate them when they reach the finish line, or would you encourage them along the way? You'd celebrate their progress, right? So why not do the same for yourself? Now, let's get practical. How do you start harnessing the power of small wins? Break your goal into tiny steps. Take your big goal and break it down into the smallest possible actions. If you want to write a book, don't focus on finishing it. Focus on writing one sentence today. Track your progress. Create a system to track your small wins. It could be a checklist, a journal, or even a simple note on your phone. Seeing your progress visually can be incredibly motivating. Celebrate every win. Find a way to celebrate your small victories. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's a high five to yourself, a moment to pause and reflect, or even treating yourself to something you enjoy. Be patient. Remember, progress takes time. It's easy to get discouraged when you don't see immediate results, but trust the process. Small wins compound even if you can't see it in the moment. Let me leave you with this thought: big change isn't about doing something extraordinary. It's about doing the ordinary consistently and intentionally over time. So what's one small win you can achieve today? It might feel insignificant now, but I promise you those small steps will lead you to the big change you're dreaming of. Because when you focus on small wins, you're not just building progress, you're building a better version of yourself. And that, my friends, is the secret to mastering your mind and achieving your goals. Let's talk about a trap that so many of us fall into: the pursuit of perfection. Perfection whispers to us, if you can just get everything right, you'll be successful. If you never make a mistake, you'll finally feel worthy. It's seductive, isn't it? But here's the hard truth: perfection is a myth. It doesn't exist, and chasing it will keep you stuck. Now, if perfection doesn't lead to success, what does? The answer is resilience. Resilience is the ability to get back up when things go wrong. It's the strength to keep moving forward even when the path is messy, uncertain, or full of mistakes. Let me start with a story. A young woman, I know, let's call her Sarah, dreamed of starting her own business. She poured her heart into it, created a plan, and launched her first product. But things didn't go as expected. Sales were low, and the feedback was tough to hear. At that moment, Sarah had two choices. She could give up and tell herself she wasn't cut out for this, or she could learn from her mistakes and try again. She chose the latter. Instead of striving for a perfect launch, she focused on what she could improve. With every iteration, she got better. Today, her business is thriving not because she was perfect, but because she was resilient. This is the power of resilience. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about learning to see failure as part of the process. When we chase perfection, we fear failure so much that we stop trying. But when we embrace resilience, we understand that failure isn't the end of the story. It's just a chapter. Why we struggle with resilience. Many of us are raised to believe that mistakes are something to avoid. From a young age, we're taught that success means getting the highest grades, winning the awards, and checking all the right boxes. Over time, we internalize this idea that anything less than perfect isn't good enough. But here's the thing: perfection doesn't teach us anything. Mistakes do. Growth doesn't happen in the comfort of getting everything right. It happens in the discomfort of figuring out what went wrong and how to do it better next time. The power of good enough. I want to introduce you to a concept that can be life-changing. Good enough. Good enough doesn't mean settling for mediocrity. It means recognizing that progress matters more than perfection. It's about showing up, doing your best in that moment, and letting that be enough. Think about it this way: if you wait until everything is perfect, you'll never start. You'll be stuck in analysis paralysis, endlessly tweaking and preparing, but never actually doing. Resilience means saying, this might not be perfect, but I'm doing it anyway. Resilience in action. So how do we cultivate resilience? Here are 3 strategies. Reframe failure. Start by changing how you see failure. Instead of seeing it as a personal flaw, see it as a learning opportunity. Ask yourself what went wrong. What can I do differently next time? The most successful people aren't the ones who never fail, they're the ones who learn the fastest. Practice self-compassion. When you fall short, be kind to yourself. Imagine you're talking to a friend who made a mistake. Would you berate them and call them a failure? Of course not. You'd encourage them to try again. Give yourself that same grace. Celebrate your effort, not just the outcome. Resilience isn't just about getting back up, it's about recognizing the courage it took to try in the first place. Celebrate the effort you're putting in, even if the results aren't perfect yet. The beauty of imperfection. Domain now. Here's a powerful truth: imperfection is where the beauty of life happens. It's where connection happens. When you share your struggles, people don't see your mistakes as weaknesses, they see them as evidence of your humanity. Think about your favorite stories, whether it's a movie, a book, or even someone's life journey. The stories that inspire us aren't the ones where everything goes perfectly. They're the ones where people face challenges, stumble, and find the strength to rise again. Resilience vs. perfection and goal setting. Let's bring this back to achieving your goals. If you focus on perfection, you'll avoid risks because risks come with the possibility of failure. But if you focus on resilience, you'll take those risks knowing that even if you stumble, you'll get back up stronger. For example, if you're learning a new skill, perfection might say, I can't make a single mistake, or I failed. Resilience says, every mistake I make is teaching me something new. If you're building a business, perfection might say, if my first product doesn't succeed, I'm not cut out for this. Resilience says, my first product is just the beginning. I'll learn, adapt, and improve. Closing thought. So let me ask you, what would you attempt if you weren't afraid of failing? What goal would you pursue if you knew that falling down wasn't the end, but just a stepping stone on the way to success? Because here's the truth, resilience will take you places that perfection never will. Resilience will help you embrace the messy, imperfect journey of growth. And in the end, it's not about being flawless, it's about being fearless in the face of failure. Perfection is about avoiding mistakes. Resilience is about embracing them. Choose resilience and you'll achieve more than you ever imagined. As we wrap up, I want you to take a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about today, the stories we tell ourselves, the power of vulnerability, the importance of small wins, and the resilience it takes to keep going. These are not just abstract ideas, they are tools. Tools that you can use to master your mind and unlock the life you want. Life isn't about being perfect, it's about being brave. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard, even when you feel unsure. It's about taking those small steps forward, knowing that every stumble is an opportunity to grow. So I'll leave you with this. What will you do with the power you have within you? What small step will you take today? What story will you rewrite? What will you dare to try, knowing you have the resilience to rise no matter what? Because when you master your mind, you don't just achieve your goals, you transform the way you live. And that transformation, that's the real secret. Thank you.